Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those of you joining us from Europe. I would like to welcome you to this meeting in which we will share experiences on projects and best practices for the inclusion of migrants in our cities. For those who don't know me, my name is Carolina Piedrafita. I'm coordinator of the IDB Cities Laboratory and of the program for sharing experiences between European and Latin American cities, which we call URBELAC. The last edition of URBELAC addressed the topic that we will be discussing today. Before getting started with sharing experiences, and I just wanted to note that we have simultaneous interpretation, English, Spanish. You may select the language of your choice by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen. And most of the presentations will be in Spanish. Secondly, this meeting is intended to be a dynamic exchange of experiences. And I know we have much of our audience in a single room in Uruguay. Anyone who wants can use their microphones. You don't need to ask for permission. I think this will allow us to have a very dynamic exchange. But please do keep your microphones muted during the initial presentation so that we don't have any issues with the audio. As I stated at the beginning, URBELAC is a knowledge exchange program between European, Latin American, and Caribbean cities, which work together and have done so for about 18 months to talk about shared challenges and propose projects to help solve them. The fifth edition of the program addressed the issue of inclusion of migrant populations in cities. So today, in the context of the creation of a migrant assistance center in Montevideo, we thought it would be important to share the projects and good practices of 4 cities in the program. What we want to do is inspire you and hopefully create a relationship of collaboration that will with the team that will be in charge of the Migrant Assistance Center in Montevideo. I will tell you who's joining us. I think it would be better for them to introduce themselves in more detail. We have Juan Carlos Hernandez Navas from Fuenlabrada, Spain, Oscar Peñuela from the city of Barranquilla, Colombia, Annika Rosbring and Anna Almin from Stockholm, Sweden, and Inti Bertocche from Bologna, Italy. Each team will share their experience and lesson learned in the effort to include migrant populations in their cities, which we think will be very useful for the Uruguay team. I would ask each of the speakers to turn on your cameras and unmute so that you can introduce yourselves. Okay, I guess you mentioned my name first, so I will introduce myself. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. I'm from Fuenlabrada. This is in the southern metropolitan area of Madrid, Spain. I'm the director of city projects, all innovative projects. I coordinate them. It's important because driving the projects is done from the office of the mayor. I wanted to thank the Ministry of Social Inclusion of Uruguay for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here, involved in the project, and share some of the experiences and learn from all of your experiences. I'm particularly pleased to share them with our friends from URBELAC, from Barranquilla, from all of the Latin American cities that we've been working with over the years. We've already learned a great deal. I look forward to hearing a little bit more about Uruguay's new center and to encourage them. Oscar, thank you, Carolina. I wanted to extend very warm greetings to our friends from URBELAC and the representatives of the other cities who will be presenting. It's always great to have the opportunity to share best practices, some of our accomplishments, as well as the challenges we face for when it comes to the economic inclusion of migrants. I'm Oscar Peñuela. I work for the Secretariat of Economic Development in Barranquilla. We call our center the Center of Opportunities, and I am the director. We have been in place for about 3 years. The current government will have 3 more months in office, and we hope to share some of our experiences and learn from cities from all over the world. Annika, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Annika Rosbring. I work as an international strategist for the labor market department in the city of Stockholm. And we've been taking part of the URBELAC project, and we are so happy to see our friends again. And we're very happy to be invited to this meeting with Uruguay. And we hope we can learn and share some interesting experiences from Stockholm. And Anna?
Hello, my name is Anna Alman, and I work as a project manager at the moment with the project and at the Welcome House in the city of Stockholm. I was in Uruguay, the New Year's Eve 1999, CSVI camp. So I'm very happy to have you online. Hope to come back to you.
Thank you, Ana. Ananika. Inti, adelante.
Hola, buen día, mucho gusto.
Good morning. I'm Inti Bertocchi. I work in the City Hall of Bologna in social development and community programs. Today, I will share a little bit about a project that we have. I'm very happy to be here to meet new friends, to share some of our practices, and to learn from you. Thank you. Okay. I will just give you a little bit of information about the project. This is an assistance center for migrants. The idea is to integrate migrants into the city and also to introduce the residents of the city to migrants. It's part of the comprehensive neighborhoods plan. It will be managed by the Ministry of Social Development. We're working with the ministry, but the coordination will be done with the different services that the migrants need on a day-to-day basis. For example, housing, transitional housing, urban services, jobs. The funding came from a donation to create this center to assist migrants. We are located in a historic area of Montevideo, and many migrants who come to Uruguay come to this area and end up congregating in the center. So we are building the center. The construction is underway and rather advanced, and we're hoping it will be finished soon. We provide some specific support, advisory services in an effort to provide the activities. That's a little bit of the context. I can have everyone introduce themselves. We have representatives of different organizations and other ministries because we are taking a comprehensive approach to this assistance. I'm Fernanda Auesper. I'm the National Director for Social Protection from the Ministry of Social Development. We have a new Migrants Division. We're here to learn and share some good practices. We want to hear about projects that are already underway because we have a long road ahead. I'm Lucho Ferreira. I work in the center with other government agencies. I'm Natalia Judin. I coordinate the Department of Migrants in the Ministry of Social Development, and we are also involved in the center. I'm Melissa Yu. I work at MIES, which is the Migrants Department. I'm Dina Carpe. I'm part of the Ministry of Labor. Good morning. I'm Luz Ana Morda. I too represent the Office of Migrants at the Labor Ministry. I am the technical secretary for the National Migrant Board. We work on migrant-related policies. Good morning. I'm Maria Sangle, Director of International Migration from the Foreign Ministry. I'm Loreda Jones. I am from the Human Rights Office at the Ministry of Social Development. Thank you for this opportunity. We're very interested in the project. Here, there are so many different agencies that are represented on the National Board. I'm Veronica Adler. I'm Veronica Mero. Unfortunately, the sound was not good enough to hear her introduction. What a multidisciplinary team you have there. Thank you so much for being here. I will turn things over to Juan Carlos. He's our first speaker. The idea is, I didn't say this at the beginning, is that we'll have about 5 minutes for Q&A after each presentation, and then at the end of the session, we will have a longer Q&A session. Well, first, I'm going to have to apologize because I will not be able to remain for the entire meeting, but I will share my email in the chat. If you have any remaining questions after I have to leave, feel free to contact me, and I would be very pleased to share the presentation. I have to leave because on Sunday, we have municipal elections in Spain, and so today is the last day of the campaign. And it's a shame that I have to leave early because I think that this is going to be very interesting. I know many of you already because we've worked with Sweden, and I've been to Colombia. And so I think this is going to be very interesting. I've been asked to talk about 3 specific projects. Fuenlabrada has a long track record of social projects. At the beginning, we are in the metropolitan area of Madrid. We're in the south. It's a very working class neighborhood. I would say people with medium to low income family. Matters of inclusion and integration have always been a part of Fuenlabrada's history. In the 1980s, we saw, in the 1970s, 1980s, we saw a population explosion, many immigrants coming. Now we're seeing immigrants from Latin America primarily. Latin America is the main source of new immigrants to Fuenlabrada. We have about 12 to 13% immigrant population, and that's about average in Spain. And so The context is not particularly special in any way. This is fairly average as far as Spain is concerned. We look at integration as something cross-cutting. We have a special department for taking in migrants. We provide this as services that exist in each and every one of the municipal offices. All must have an office for migrants, and we bring in the community to help as well. We have a network we call the anti-rumor network. The idea is to combat hate speech or discrimination. We also have a council that proposes projects to the municipal government. Much comes from the community. It's not imposed by the municipal government. We want to hear from the community. We want to hear from both the members of the community and new migrants. And we have also a jobs project because this is one of the main ways that immigrants can integrate into the community. Jobs are vital because it helps to reduce the levels of vulnerability. We have this, it's part of a larger European project which looks at innovative ideas at municipal level for migrants. These are rather large projects. The objective is to develop new methodologies for assisting migrants. In Fuenlabrada, we don't talk about projects for migrants. We talk about projects for the citizens of Fuenlabrada. It's integration for immigrants and locals, because integration must include the local community as well as those who are new to the community. We must understand the intercultural nature of integration, and this helps for development because interculturality is what makes our community richer. We work with the private sector. These are companies that have come to our centers to train new workers. They provide them with the technical skills needed for the jobs that they have to offer. We have the big challenges labs. These are laboratories that provide job opportunities. So these provide two things: training, technical training for the sectors where the jobs exist, and it's also the social skills needed for each of these jobs. These social skills are not addressed in the same way as technical skills are. For example, in these areas of cooperation, when these skills are being built, or how to do public speaking or group work, so they created these different dynamics where they would have locals and immigrants working together, teaching them how to find jobs and how to do so successfully, and so that people would get to meet each other. This strategy has worked very well because despite the diversity of the group, well, the diversity of the group was what made the group richer, and it made their opportunities broader. We also need the private sector for this type of skills building, because they come to us and they tell us what they need. What surprised us was that one of the main barriers for immigrants who were not trained to work in certain sectors, and I'm sure the same happens in your countries, where immigrants come and they tend to settle in very specific areas, and maybe they are low skilled or maybe they're high skilled. So we're trying to surmount this barrier, knowing that companies and the private sector have needs. They helped us in this training.
One of the difficulties that we faced, and this was one of the objectives that we had set for ourselves, is that we wanted to deal with young migrants. And I'm talking about second generation young people who get to a certain age, but whose origins are from migrants. But in these cases, we had a very singular situation because these are young people. They have a high school dropout rate and other troubling issues. And the program that was so successful with migrant young people or with migrants did not work so well with the young people that came from migrant families, at least not in Fuenlabrada. To that end, I wanted to talk about a project that did not really involve a participation lab, because when we considered the whole thing, we didn't consider young people. We use young people to elevate the image of the city's future, but we never asked the young people what their thoughts were on this. And so we looked at a European project, Hasta and we are currently developing participation labs in which we ask young people what they need to be able to favor their participation in city activities to improve the city and to foster a unified community. And one of the first things we heard from young people is that the first thing we want is for you to ask us what we think. And once we asked, they posed a number of proposals, some of them very interesting, such as the creation of intermediate agencies involving citizens, NGOs, communities of young people, and that this agency could be the conduit towards the local government leadership. So they could have spokespersons that represented the interests of migrants. And they also proposed concrete activities such as more participation space and other interesting matters such as new communication models. We see how young people are heavily influenced by social media, but when we work with young people, we can really improve our communication efforts. And so when we have these programs, many times you talk about people with gray hairs trying to tell young people what they need. And we've departed from that. In any case, we ask young people what we need, and we ask them to lead these proposals. These are not merely activities for migrants, but rather activities proposed for city improvements. And another project, I hope I'm not taking up too much time. I was going to say, Juan Carlos, you have 2 minutes left. Another project that we are very proud of relates to the discrimination antenna. And this is different from the anti-rumor program, which is a more informal program, but we're trying to come up with a more formal model for this. And like the anti-discrimination effort, we want to do a couple of things. First, that we address the most vulnerable populations. And we're not just restricting this to migrants. And what the administration, in this case, us, needs to do when we undertake these policymaking efforts. Many times when we do policymaking, we claim that we're doing policymaking for everyone, but we don't consider the characteristics of certain population groups. And there are many discrepancies, or rather deficiencies, in the program. Much of it is related to improper documentation for all population groups, working hours. and other trivial matters, like the catering process in meetings. And it turns out that if in certain groups, if you don't have a halal food or Muslim representatives, then they can't attend or participate in some of these meetings. So these are perhaps trivial matters, but they're important nonetheless. We also need to address the different instances of discrimination that occur throughout the city. Migrants in particular are very fearful of reporting these types of discrimination cases to the authorities due to fear of reprisals or what have you. Sometimes it's easier to share these discriminatory practices with their peers and with their community. And so it's the community representing this group that can go to the authorities. So this type of program also has some challenges. We have these cases that occur all over the city. And at a local level, the communities themselves can gauge how well the city leadership is addressing these discriminatory practices. So that was very briefly a summary of all three projects. I'm sharing in the chat room my email, and I'm happy to provide any additional information. All you have to do is reach out to me and request it. Thank you very much for the invitation to take part. It's not just Juan Carlos that has to leave us. I want to ask anyone in the room if they have any question for Uruguay. And this anti-rumor program, it could be a very good experience for URBELAC. And we've all adapted to different anti-discrimination programs. But I don't know if anyone else in Uruguay wants to ask a question or two before we lose Juan Carlos.
No escucho a nadie, no sé si hay respuesta.
I've heard from no one, nor do I see any raised hands. So
No, primero, muchas gracias.
well, first and foremost, thank you very much to Juan Carlos. It was a wonderful presentation. And we particularly were struck by how diverse the program is, addressing different communities. The question that we have, though, how do you reach out to the particular population when inquiring about city performance and response? What we've seen is that the traditional communication channels have a very limited impact. The awareness campaigns, communication campaigns have a limited impact. In our case, one relevant characteristic is that we capitalize on social networks within the community. And this includes associations, which can serve as a conduit for communication. It can provide access to relevant people. And among these associations, we have different types. There are regional associations in Spain, for example, and they work directly with the migrants. And this work with association has worked very well because they work with the relevant populations. They have relationships with these populations. And so when we empower these associations, now we have many immigrant associations, and this strategy works very well. Additionally, we work very closely with cultural centers that operate in the city. And something that we've been emphasizing extensively is working with young people in schools and other places, because we can disseminate knowledge and we can also garner knowledge from these young people. And then we realize that when addressing or trying to address parents, their children can be an excellent conduit. We had a case of a Black young man who had issues in school, but now he's an engineer and he's an excellent source of information, a wonderful representative for our efforts, because it's easier to communicate and reach out to all of these populations through their peers or associations that work directly with them, that have cultivated relationship with them. There are key people in these communities that we can use as focal points to disseminate any information. Thank you very much for your participation, Juan Carlos. We didn't have time to address any jobs issues. This dialogue with business people is really interesting to us. In Uruguay, the sectors that we interact with extensively in the public arena include civil society organizations that represent migrant populations. But at the Ministry of Labor, we primarily deal with business people, and we're a little bit behind the curve in this type of activity. I wanted to ask if you've had any kind of engagement with the business sector. What can you share with us regarding your progress made with that arena? Well, we did work extensively with social organizations at Fuenlabrada due to the types of businesses that we have, mostly small family-owned businesses. We worked along several fronts. We created a large business network, and many of these members have participated in our programs. We started dealing with them individually, but then we moved on to associations that had relationships with employers and businesses. And there's this idea that businesses don't really see migrants. And in Spain, for example, we do have certain sectors where they need workers. There are workers that find certain sectors that are not appealing, and therefore there's a great shortage of workers for some of these sectors. So we need to be able to engage in a much more effective way with these populations and try to overcome these challenges. Once companies and businesses overcome this barrier and this stereotype that they have of migrant workers, then we can open up the flow. Yet this is not a short, easy process. In our case, it took us 3 years to put these two groups together. So we needed to involve people in the process, and it took at times up to 6 months to get both parties to the table. So undoubtedly, it's a long-term process, and I imagine that the same happens in Uruguay, but we are at the right time right now for businesses to see what the potential is there. We're undergoing a transition of sorts, and businesses need to expand their horizons when it comes to hiring workers, and they need to include these population groups to be able to meet their own needs. But for this purpose, we need a dialogue. Juan Carlos, I wanted to follow up a little bit more on the presentation and leave the questions to the end. Thank you very much. Thank you, Juan Carlos. We've shared your email in the chat, and now we're going to continue with our program so that we can continue with the agenda. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos.
Oscar, te paso la palabra.
Oscar, you have the floor. Thank you, Carolina, and thank you, Juan Carlos, for your presentation. I'm going to share my screen that shows our website, which is, of course, available for you to access and look for any information or details about any program. Can you all see it? Yes, we can. I will present something very briefly, but the idea is to give you an impression such that you'll be able to follow up and contact us to learn more about this wonderful experience that we've had in Lima. I will be catching a flight back to Barranquilla very soon. I was invited by the ILO to give a presentation in Barranquilla. So I wanted to thank the ILO for the invitation. And I'll be brief because I have to go and to run to the airport to catch a plane. I wanted to just briefly summarize the characteristics of Barranquilla. This is the city in Colombia that has received the largest number of migrants, and they've used this strategy that we've had in Colombia to facilitate and foster access for our Venezuelan brothers to good sources for jobs and other services. So in Barranquilla, in the 3-year mayor's administration, we've undergone a transformation process to focus inclusion. And so as a part of this process, we redesigned our mission to be able to provide better services for these population groups. And with very little in the way of resources, we were able to come up with a roadmap for including vulnerable populations, including migrants. And part of the roadmap includes income generation based on jobs and entrepreneurship. And these are some of the services that we offer in our Opportunity Center. And the name itself of the facility is important because we have people who are fearful of reaching out to the mayor's office or the city leadership because their condition in country is deemed to be irregular. So we're trying to make it easy for them to reach out to us. And the Opportunities Center is the office that stems from the mayor's office dedicated to providing services for these populations through different pathways. The employability route helps people searching for jobs to find one. We have more than 40,000 people registered in this platform, and we also have relationships with the business sector and employer groups who need workers for their purposes. I wanted to highlight certain activities very briefly in this particular program. People that arrive searching for a job don't have to worry about their migratory condition or status. And so we established this roadmap to be able to allow them a pathway to finding a job. And so we've tried to engender a great deal of trust in the process. And we're always trying to cultivate an attitude where we listen to the population's needs. And as part of their process in searching for a job, we also provide a lot of training and a lot of information. And with businesses and employers, we try to conduct extensive awareness. We do have in-person visits with these businesses and employers. We use information from different organizations. At present, we have 16 international organizations in Barranquilla that are supporting our efforts with the business sector to persuade business owners and employers to open their doors to migrant workers. And we try to make them see that it's a good business practice for them to work with us. We provide a number of different institutional support. We also conduct frequent breakfast meetings to talk to business people about this roadmap, and we've created some certifications that allow employers that hire members of vulnerable populations to highlight this status. And so we do a lot of work through the media. We like to tell stories about these people. We tell stories about their lives and the contributions that they are making to their families, to the city, and to the country. And this has been very well received, especially in social media, given that this is a key strategy. And we end up recognizing these businesses and employers for taking part in the program. So this is the employability roadmap. It makes it easier for both migrants and employers to find each other. And we've gotten recognition at the national level for ensuring that these people are, in fact, linked to a job that can earn them an income. We've included all sorts of people in this, including disabled and others in Barranquilla. And we have vacancies. We also have resumes. We conduct analysis of these resumes and CVs. And we look at job descriptions for positions that companies want to fill. And so the idea is to facilitate the transfer of information to employers about potential candidate workers, and vice versa. We provide information to these people so that they can see what jobs they could qualify for. And clearly, we work very extensively with each migrant person, trying to do some skills building, facilitate access to them, and by extension to these jobs, we provide training. So we have a process not necessarily focused on employers or potential employees. We wanted to approach this from a more comprehensive way, and we take into account any and all migrants that arrive in the city of Barranquilla. On the right side of the website, we see a link to a project called We Are All Barranquilla. This is an award-winning program, given its success in connecting employers with migrant populations that reside in Barranquilla. This is a project that received an award from the Global Cities Fund. And what it is, it's a job-seeking process where each migrant is provided with a pathway to get a job. We provide economic support for transportation and other needs. We provide training. We focus extensively on soft skills building and other skills that these people need when interviewing for a position or a job. Through this project, Todos son Barranquilla, everyone is Barranquilla, we began with 100 migrants, but at present we have 2 additional operations that have allowed us to expand our efforts to provide more capacity for more migrants through these pathways. The other pathway that I wanted to talk to you about relates to entrepreneurship. So migrants that don't have migratory documentation can undergo some training, get some information about perhaps starting their own business. And we have pathways for entrepreneurs through a process of awareness, categorization. We train people to start their own business, and we've also engaged in an interesting process of promoting these businesses started by these migrant entrepreneurs in different markets and other places. It's a win-win situation because this also leads to a lot of traffic in markets and shopping malls. They like it because they have a lot more people, a lot more customers. And we also provide opportunities for entrepreneurs to be able to generate revenue through the work in these markets. So this is a solution that allows people to generate an income in the short term, but it also allows migrant populations and other vulnerable populations to acquire the skills that they need to be able to get a job or start a business. And lastly, we have a pathway towards learning or training. And this allows migrants to have better probabilities of getting a job. And we work extensively with employers through information centers with the National Center of Learning here in Colombia as well. And this is part of everything that we do as part of the mayor's office. Lastly, all I have left to do is to invite you to access our website to get any of this information. And I cannot highlight the importance or highlight the enough the importance of partnerships with key stakeholders in both the employer sector as well as other national and local and state agencies. And we have a lot of partnerships with the private sector. Many of the entities that want to do any type of social responsibility project need information about the affected populations. They need data. They need information. We provide all of that here in the Barranquilla city government. And it's also important for you to take into account that you need to facilitate these agreements with different entities. Sometimes these contracts or agreements can take as long as 7 to 8 months. We have a memorandum that we could put together in 2 weeks. I end up signing it, and it's a very simple document that facilitates collaboration between partner stakeholders. And that's one of the great successes that we've had in the city of Barranquilla, because this has been like a strategic snowball that has been growing over time. And as we find different supports and sources of information, we build on the program. And this adds a great deal of capacity to any process that we wish to undertake here in Barranquilla. We've also participated in a number of other projects, and we're constantly creating projects, which is important because it allows us access not only to resources, but it also allows us to highlight our roadmaps and pathways and processes. And it's key for us to have the necessary human capital that is properly trained, prepared, and educated to be able to provide services to citizens. And this has been a wonderful experience of the city of Barranquilla, and we hope to be able to support any of your programs and learn from you as well, so we can expand our network of opportunity centers, not just in Barranquilla, but perhaps all over the world. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Oscar. Wonderful.
Activando el micrófono.
Any questions? I have a question. Can you discuss a particular case involving a person that, thanks to your efforts, was able to find a job? Clearly, you have a very interesting model, but I wonder if you could talk about an example that you can recall involving a person who, thanks to the work and the services offered at the Opportunity Center, were able to improve their quality of life?
No se escuchó, pero ¿quieren hacer más de una pregunta?
Sorry, Vero, did you want to ask more than one question? The audio is very deficient. Apologies from the English booth. Well, we are part of the Ministry of Labor, so a lot of what you're talking about really resonates with us. And I was curious about whether or not you tried to expand your program to other sectors. In Uruguay, I don't think we have a program that is just like this one. But clearly, your program focuses on the most vulnerable populations, and something that we could discuss is that you don't necessarily have to create very specific programs because their scope may be very limited. One of the demands that keeps coming up in our country from civil society, unfortunately, the audio is of insufficient quality.
La materia laboral también es bastante diferente en relación a los migrantes que recibimos, a los países de los migrantes que recibimos. Pero bueno, en otro momento intercambiaremos sobre el contenido de estos dispositivos y muchísimas
At a future time, we can perhaps have a conversation about specific content. Thank you. As far as the first question is concerned, it's more than 600 immigrants we've been able to help and help find jobs. I hired a migrant who works in our office. We were able to hire this individual, and this is the best example of a story. Each one is one of overcoming obstacles, and it's very emotional for us. I'm always saying this to my team. Every day we come into the rooms and we greet them. It's very emotional. We are very moved by the individual stories. Our communication strategy, the videos that we share on our website and social networks will help you get a better idea of this.
Este fue un proyecto, la ruta es para todos, como le decía yo, para población vulnerable. La ruta de empleo
we have the employment route. This is for the entire vulnerable community. We also have sign language interpreters for those who are deaf. We have specialists for dealing with people with disabilities. And I say experts, these are really our liaisons. These are individuals who train to provide counseling and counseling to support immigrants. So our staff becomes empowered, and then they're able to directly assist the individuals. We do not have as much contact with the final users, but our staff do. We make sure that we're providing timely, truthful information. We have worked with the Secretary of the Interior. We have been sharing data and information. We want to ensure that immigrants who are seeking jobs don't have to travel throughout the city looking for opportunities. We want to be a one-stop shop and make sure that we're including them in this network. There are different methodologies, there are different workshops for skills building. We use inclusive language. We've adapted it for each of the different populations, but sometimes we're mixing them. In all of these workshops, we're mixing all types of communities. If it's women heads of households, young people who have no job experience, victims of conflicts, immigrants, they can all attend the same workshops. And then we also provide specific individualized support. We've standardized the entire path, as it were, so that anyone in Barranquilla can avail themselves of it. I am here for any further questions, and we'd be very pleased to support you. And I wanted to commend you on what you're doing. Just having come together is the first step. That is the most difficult step of all. It's getting everyone around the same table, talking about the same things. That's better than just starting and reinventing the wheel. So I am here for you for any further questions you have, and I extend a warm embrace to you. I'm now going to turn things over to Annika and Anna. I don't know if you're going to be presenting together or individually, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I don't know if Roberto will be sharing the screen or if... Perfect.
Yes.
I just want to set the scene a little bit. I'm not too sure how familiar you are with Sweden and Stockholm. So we can go to the next slide, please. Stockholm is the capital of Sweden, and we have around 1 million inhabitants, where in Sweden we have 10 million inhabitants. And about 20% of the population is born outside of Sweden. And we had a large influx of refugees in 2015, where a lot of people from Syria came. And we also have many people born in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the last couple of years, we have fewer refugees, but we all have some people from Ukraine coming. And in Stockholm, we have a quite qualified labor market. So it's high standards, and it's quite tricky to find a job if you do not have a higher education. And I will let Anna present our work with the Welcome House, and I will also give some information about our integration pact later on. Anna, is your mic working? She had some technical problems before, so I hope it's functioning. She was kicked out of the meeting. Hopefully she will join us shortly. So in Stockholm, we have created a welcome house for all newcomers in the city. And it's thought to be a one-stop shop for all newcomers to get the right and same information. So it's a way to guide all people to find the right path, and in the end, hopefully find sustainable living in Stockholm and be established on the labor market. And as you know, you have many contacts with different authorities and different information centers when you're new to a city. This is one way of shortening this time and to be able to make it more efficient and shorten the time to establishment for the people. And Welcome House is a collaboration between the labor market department, which is the department we represent, and the social department of the city of Stockholm. And of course, we also have collaboration with the national authorities like the Public Employment Service and Migration Board, and also the health sector, as well as the civil society. Anna, is you connected? No, I can see her.
Annika, I suggest that you continue.
Yeah, I'll continue. So the Welcome House is supposed to give like a holistic support for all newcomers. So the main thing that happens is a small screening of the needs of each and every person. So you can get the support whether you need information about living in Stockholm, you need support in finding a job, or you need to have that contact information because you need to register at the right places. Yeah, get the right papers and be included in the system. Anna, are you here?
Yeah, it's crazy here.
Yes. Please continue.
Where are you?
You're the
Where are
expert.
you?
I said holistic support. Take it from start.
Yes.
Yes.
No, okay. We are from the city of Stockholm, a Welcome House. So when you're a citizen, when you get a permit to stay or a temporary permit, and you're a citizen of Stockholm, we have the Welcome House as the first point, the first one-stop shop to when you come to Stockholm. And the politician, I think you take the next slide, and I'll come back to the holistic support, Annika, if it's okay. So we got admission from our politicians that the labor market administration, have you explained about that, Annika? Who we are, okay. The labor market administration is responsible for all adult education in Stockholm, but also all the job initiatives in the city. So we always work with the people that are farthest away from the labor market in different ways. And when now we work together with the social service that have been responsible for the first 2 to 3 years when the newcomer come to Stockholm. When they come to Stockholm, they also need to join the establishment program. That's the program for 2 years. When you go to the establishment program, you study Swedish, and you also belong to the National Swedish Employment Center. So you study Swedish and you search for jobs. Do you hear me good? Is it okay? Good. I'm in a public place here. So the first 2 years, and the politicians wanted us to like be a complement from the labor market administration, to be a complement to the National Swedish Employment Center, because we have long experience to help this group, so to say. So together we finally, 2 years ago, we inaugurated the Welcome House. We are very proud of that. We've been all over Europe and try to get inspired about this. So here is our organization around Welcome House. And you see to the left, Intro Stockholm, that is social service. They work with, they also work with, for example, the quota refugees. They meet them at the airport and they help them with community guidance and the housing and things like that. And they also work with regular asylum seekers when they are citizens of Stockholm. And then we have established a center. So everything we do, because this is not really our target group, but the politicians wanted us to work with this. So we give them voluntarily help. And the main focus and the purpose is to be very early when they come to Sweden, to give them all the tools, not to wait like 4 years, so to say. So we can help them mainly, or it's a big focus on job matching and digital guidance. Are very many organizations in Sweden, administration don't have time to help newcomers and illiterate people to come online. So we have a great focus on supporting with the digital focus. Study counseling, we match people to leisure activities, because in Sweden you have to, if you, in the evenings, everybody go to leisure activities. So there is where you meet people, basically. So we try to match them to ordinary leisure activities. We have mentorship, and also we work with business startups and so on. And at the moment, I'm a project manager for the Ukrainian team. And this is special because Ukrainian people belongs to the migration board. And it's not a citizens of Stockholm, but we offer voluntary help, and they only have like €7 per day. So job matching is really a big initiative. And we have something called, I don't know if you said that, Annika, but the Integration Pact. No, we have a network of, like 2 years ago, we started a network in town with all companies and employers who want to join the Integration Pact to be like, to be a part of, to employ the newcomers in Stockholm. So that is a very good network where we can find employers and engagement around this question. We have lots of jobs. We have lots of like, we need lots of competence, like in caring sectors and many places. The problem is, of course, as in many countries, we need to upskill also the people so they match the employment. And of course, the national authorities that I talked about, we have this in the middle there, the third thing there. We have the Swedish Public Employment Service, is very important. They are at our Welcome House once a week. We also have the National Government Service Center, that is, they need that for the personal security numbers. And the regions of Stockholm is also, we try to work with them closely. It's always difficult for us to like have a close cooperation with the region. The region is about everything about the health around this group. So we really try to be better at that and to bring them to Welcome House. And then we have the civil society that is getting a bigger and bigger cooperation around the civil society. Especially now with the Ukrainian team, we have lots of NGOs that are working with this target group. So we try to collaborate. But
Anna, I'm sorry to interrupt. We need to wrap up because we only have 20 minutes more and we need to have Inti. So if you can wrap up in 2 minutes, I would appreciate that. So we leave space for questions.
Yeah, okay. Well, basically, I think you understand the concept. It's about one-stop shop and to meet them early. And we talked about the other, because we have job centers, but then you have maybe been here for a few years, but now we find that people are very motivated in the beginning. So I think it's a very good way to really meet the newcomers at the early stage and actually work close with them and get them self-sufficient. So we can leave it there. Thank you. I lost the sound now. Do you hear? You have the microphone.
Creo que prefiero pasarle la palabra a Inti y después dejar el último bloque para preguntas y los que se
I
puedan
think
quedar.
I'll yield the floor to Infi, and for those that can stay with us for a few more minutes, we can do some Q&A. Sorry for rushing everybody. That's all right. I'll be speaking very rapidly, or not so much rapidly, but I'll try to be succinct. This project began in 2015 with the UVIA call, which is something that Juan Carlos already talked about. Let me share my screen here. The project deals with urban regeneration, which means that we've transformed a portion of the city that had a number of issues, including complete abandonment, and we created an experimental urban space, more welcoming area with different resources, not just for migrants, but for all citizens and residents. It's a model of collaboration, and I wanted to focus on some of the most interesting aspects that will highlight the virtues of the project. This is a series of photographs of the prior condition of the facility. It was a private clinic that went broke in 2000. It was acquired by the city in 2005. It managed the acquisition with funding from Europe, and this is the final project. It's a center whereby you can see many economic activity. There's a housing, building, theater, some workshops, a restaurant, a hostel, and a cultural center that has working spaces. So there's a great deal of green spaces that provide more appeal for the entire area. The project is undergoing an experimental process or phase. We've already concluded the urban intervention portion. We were not able to complete the main building that housed the restaurant, and so we ended up going with some temporary buildings in the form of containers. But we have been working in partnership with the people that live on site to create a more social environment. We worked extensively with associations that work in the surrounding area to the project. This is a picture of the housing building, and there have been some public calls to undertake different cohabitation experiences, and there are also different businesses operating there. And there's also a lot of allocated space for work. Now we see here the social environment here. Many of these people are migrants, but not all. We had the obligation to include at least 40% migrants, and the residents that live in the housing facility come from every corner of Earth. We have 10 minors, all of foreign extraction. And as stated earlier, more than 40% of the residents are foreigners. We collaborated with the community to come up with a values letter, which is like the guiding document for everything that we do here. I'd like to show you some images so you can have a better idea of the social impact brought about by this project. We conduct extensive training, continuous education programs with migrants, addressing different topical areas such as social agriculture. We have open markets and a Syrian restaurant that is operated by a family that lives in the housing facility. We just started a vertical plantation here, and we have a lot of space and different areas for socializing, playing sports. We also have tourist attractions that attract other people to the area. Additionally, we have a lot of open activities that are available to residents in the neighborhood as well as other residents in the city, a theater, and we address different cultural events. We have the open market. And more than anything, this is a location that facilitates the empowering process for the residents. We provide guidance and information on services, facilitate access to training programs. We provide support in cases where some of the residents have poor health. They provide coordination services for the educational facilities that are on site. We also coordinated an open to all residents Italian language course. The partnership is a public-private partnership. It includes a control room that involves participation by the local city government, the local coordinator in the community, and the management is made up of a temporary cluster of social agencies, and it involves a lot of different people in different key thematic areas. Most important part of this is the resident assembly, which is an autonomous body. What we're trying to do is ensure that the community have more decision-making capability and that the community takes part in every aspect of the process. And the idea would be to incorporate them into every phase of the project, the control room, and what have you. What we have now is a creative center for social innovation. We have a number of new workers. We've also garnered a number of employment contracts. Additionally, we work with higher education institutions, universities, and other similar organizations. We don't know what this will end up with, whether or not it'll be some form of a company, a consortium, or what have you. But there is a co-design, and at the same time, it represents a value because it requires representation and total trust in the process on the part of the community, the local city government, and all of the stakeholders that are a part of the process. So what we've learned over these recent years through experimentation and collaboration is to overcome challenges and work together by involving all citizens and highlighting this manner of collaboration, particularly on the management side for the project. That is briefly a summary of the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Cinti.
Thank you.
Le paso la palabra a Vero, Uruguay.
Vero from Uruguay, you have the floor.
No, yo quería preguntar, en realidad para todos los proyectos.
I wanted to ask, with regard to all the projects, how do you manage certain aspects of the project? I think Oscar talked about the issue of formal employment, but how do you handle entrepreneurship? Could you tell us a little bit about whatever experiences you've had in your project related to entrepreneurship? Well, Oscar left us, but I remember the visit that we made to Barranquilla. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Barranquilla has a migrant support process to be able to regularize their situation. And I don't have the details, but there's a great deal of work involved in trying to get them legal status. But according to Oscar, the whole process is almost blind. They provide support to migrants and citizens alike with developing and creating their resumes to make them more employable. And he said so explicitly. The practices are based on the criteria that anybody who needs training gets it, and they are incorporated or they facilitate the incorporation into any kind of employment arrangement, be it in the formal or the informal sectors. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, you're right. And I'd like to yield the floor to Annika to discuss how they do that in Sweden. I think it's really interesting. Annika or Anna?
Yes, I'd say that's part of our, also in the Welcome House, and we also have some specific people who can support people who would like to start their own business. I'm not well into the details, but I think there's always like a process to learn the market and get the capital and everything. But we do have support system to promote people with entrepreneurial skills.
But Annika, to access the system, to access the trainings that you provide, and to apply for jobs, they need to be formally or legal in the country, or you are blind to that?
Yeah. So you need to have an official status to be able to enter our courses and training programs, and also to be enrolled at our job centers. So you need to apply for the asylum and get your permit. It's normally now, it's not a permanent one, but it's for a specific amount of time, but then you're welcome to join our system. And like we also offer like language classes. They're always open and for free for everyone. And we can also offer specific courses, of course. And we also have within our integration pact, where we have more than 400 companies and representatives from the official sector and the civil society. We always have a dialogue and discuss where are the needs in the companies to hire people, and then we can adapt and adjust trainings and courses according to those needs. So hopefully we can find a straight path for the people who need upskilling and be able to find a job afterwards with the right skills.
But getting the status of refugee is the hardest part, maybe.
Yes, that's a bit hard. You need to get a specific permit from the migration board, and that is on a national level, of course. And depending on your background, from some countries, of course, it's more easy. And it's still a bit of a question mark whether the people from Ukraine, because there's a specific directive on the European Union level. So that is still pending on how to be able to be accepted in the different courses and centers. But yeah, so you need to apply and get your permit, then you're welcome to join.
Thank you so much. Inti, ¿querés contestar como lo hacen en Bolonia?
Sí, en Bolonia también.
Indy, can you tell us a little about what they do in Bologna? Yes, likewise in Bologna, anybody who wishes to come into the Welcome House or participate in any community program first needs to undergo a legal process to, at the very least, request asylum, to be able to, at the very least, begin the legal process, and they subsequently get the necessary support that they need for this legal phase. So they would need at minimum request for asylum. Well, no, this is a right that all people have when they arrive in Italy. And in Italy, they have to stay in Italy until their request or application is adjudicated. So it can take 3 to 4 years to get the whole thing done. But in the meantime, they are allowed to stay in country and they are also allowed access to participate in the project.
Thank you. I'm Andres. First, I wanted to congratulate you all on your project. And I wanted to note that in Uruguay, we are working with the migrant and refugee communities. The center will become a part of this national plan in 2023 and 2024. This is our first integration plan. Again, its scope is nationwide. We're working with the departmental governments as well. I would like to thank you for sharing your experiences. They are going to be very helpful for us as food for thought. We are looking at how we are going to be addressing different groups in the plan. The plan has 8 pillars, but the overarching objective is to guarantee the integration of migrants. It's we have a board that works with the executive branch in policy development. There are 4 different ministries involved: the Labor Ministry, Social Development Ministry, the Social Development, as well as the Foreign Ministry. Civil society also takes part in this board. And civil society has a say in what our agenda will be in each of the meetings. We are working with some municipal governments and their migration offices for better integration. We are also working on developing public policies on human mobility. What Andres was saying, and all of your information will help us as we start to get to work with this center. What's important is to shorten the time it takes to integrate migrants. We want these interagency efforts to be brought to bear in public policy development. There must be cooperation amongst different government agencies and working with civil society. The Refugee Commission and the board are bodies with members that represent different agencies, ministries, or municipal governments in order to implement Uruguay's national immigration policy. I have a question regarding employment opportunities and the different projects we heard about. The support and some of the wages they earn. Have you seen discrimination when these immigrants or refugees go out seeking employment? I can say in Colombia, and I'm sure they have data on this, but I will find out about the case in Fuenlabrada.
If you have any information on the comparison of the salaries perceived by this population that receive employment services in comparison to the regular population of Sweden.
And now when it comes to salaries, because it's all usually regulated in like deals with what's it called? Yeah, the organizations, labor organizations, they set deals and you cannot go under those usually. But of course, there are some obstacles for people with the migrant background to enter the labor market. I don't think there's a question about that. It's easier for a person with a very Swedish name or appearance to get a job. But sometimes it's also the demand of speaking Swedish or other measures that are important to enter the labor market. But I do believe there are extra obstacles, but not when it comes to salary, like officially. Of course, people might take jobs that are less paid or like not on the like open labor market, but those would not be in the statistics as well.
Voy a hacer la pregunta en español.
I'm going to ask a question. And have you seen a success story in terms of placing migrants in a very specific area of the economy? So what type of job is typical for an individual who may come through your welcome house or one-stop shop? Could you give us an idea?
I think in Stockholm, there's a high demand in care for the elderly or also care for children. And I know many migrant people, they do have experience from household work or taking care of the families. That is one path that many people choose to take. And they can enter some training courses and get a diploma for maybe 2 years. And we also have programs where you combine the language studies with the practical studies, so you become a nurse or assistant nurse, like you do on both the training and the language training combined, so they shorten the length to actually enter the labor market. So I think those are very popular and in high demand also for the migrant people and the labor market.
Thank you, Annika. Inti, no sé si vos tenés información de ese tema.
No, no tengo información.
Do you have information? I do not have specific data. What we do is we endeavor to find job opportunities that we know exist in the cities. For example, elder care. Many people need to find all opportunities possible for individuals to get jobs, but the market can be a bit difficult, especially for those who do not speak Italian. It can be complicated and difficult to find employment. Yes, speaking the language is an issue. I know that. And is that also a problem in Uruguay? In Uruguay, most of those coming do speak Spanish. Of course, there are some exceptions to that, but most of the migrants we are taking in speak Spanish. Again, generally speaking, most are Spanish speaking. Cuba, Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, these are the countries of origin. So language is not really an issue. The matter of digitalization is important. Uruguay is a highly digitized economy and society, and so much is done online. The interpreter apologizes. The sound coming from Uruguay is very deficient. I will do my best to summarize what they are saying. When it comes to housing, we provide support, but it can be difficult. Healthcare is also a challenge for us. As you all know, currently there are 7 million Venezuelan refugees in the world. Many have come to Uruguay. We have some who left Venezuela, then they spend 2 years in Peru and 2 years in Ecuador, and then they come to Uruguay. We have the specific case of a very young girl who's been essentially a migrant or refugee her entire life, moving from country to country with her family. Would you care to comment on this one-stop shop you have in terms of digital access for individuals to services or in terms of housing? Anna or Annika?
Yeah, sorry, Anna has left the meeting. Yeah, of course, the digital divide is a great problem. Many people do not have the same skills or the habit of using the digital tools to the same extent that is well needed in a society like in Stockholm or in Montevideo. So we support the people with the digital trainings, and we have digital classes and also digital support. We also try to have people out throughout the city at the libraries or the community centers that can give guidance and advice in using the digital support. But it is a struggle, and it's also hard for many people to actually find the equipment. So that's also something we try to make accessible by offering it in public spaces like the libraries. And housing is also a big issue. We can provide housing for quota refugees and some specific people who are like distributed through the National Migrant Board to Stockholm, but that is maybe like 600, 1,000 people a year, and the rest need to find their own housing. So we offer support by having like coaching in how to find housing, and that is usually renting like secondhand or renting a room in a flat in Stockholm, and try to navigate through the digital also platforms where housing opportunities are offered. But that is also a big struggle, and especially now when the inflation and actually less houses are built. So that will probably be an even larger problem in the future.
Thank you,
Annika. The Salus program that you have tries to help migrants find housing, but you need to scale it up. Yes, community work is very important. We want people in the neighborhood to get to know the Salus residents. Sometimes it's difficult to have this opportunity for members of the community and society to meet our migrants. But we do try to help them find housing after they've come through our center, but it is quite difficult. What we're doing is using the $5 million we have to create a partial subsidy program for housing as a way to hasten the integration process and help as many as we can. It's something rather difficult to navigate in a country where regular citizens also have trouble finding housing sometimes. So at the country level, it is well known that migrants are more vulnerable. They don't have social networks or family ties. It's not necessarily a conflict per se, but it's something that could lead to conflict. We want to show that these partial subsidies will help in the integration process and are working with the Ministry of Social Development.
La verdad, yo acá voy a opinar de haber estado hablando con todas estas ciudades que participaron en
I've been
URBELAC.
talking to all of these cities that have participated with URBELAC, and I think that the key to success for these services is that they don't just focus on migrant populations, but vulnerable populations. They all need jobs. There's no shortage of people that need these services among these populations. So what Salas is trying to do in Bologna is the same, because it takes advantage of the interaction with those populations to avoid any resentment building up. But it's a good practice, not just create programs for migrants, but rather programs for vulnerable populations. The issue of housing is not one that was mentioned by Barranquilla, but eventually that's part of what the network needs to do. I don't know if you have any more questions. The idea primarily for this meeting is to put you in contact with each other, given that like all these processes, the devil is in the details, and you need to talk to each other to highlight what you're most interested in to be able to move forward. So if you have one more question, then you can go ahead and pose it. Otherwise, we can close the session. And yes, I wanted to ask a last question that has to do with all of the projects. I'd like to ask if when it comes to migrant populations, you have any limits? I mean, is there a deadline by which they have to leave the country, or can they extend said deadline for migrant populations? Inti. There's a temporary limit, which is 2 years plus 2, so there's a possibility of remaining up to 4 years, but that's part of the experimentation. We need to see which aspects of this are important. There's another portion of this that would involve a shorter time frame. And when we talk about housing, then that's for people by and large who expect to spend more time in the country. Now, if we change these communities, if we rotate communities every 2 to 3 years, it would be difficult to achieve any measure of balance with this. So we have to really address the housing project, because it's important that the community is adequately serviced and develops a feeling of belonging to the community. And 2 to 3 years is not enough to really integrate into a community. People, by and large, need more time to do that. Thank you, Inti. Annika, I don't know if you
when an immigrant can receive services. Is it when they just arrived? Is there a limit to if they have been in the country for some time, they're not eligible?
I think like officially the statute as a newcomer is 24 months. And that is when you're at the public employment services, you're at the introduction program, establishment program for 2 years. So that is like the official limit. But I think what we see is that most people who do not succeed in entering the labor market or included in society at large, they of course need extra support. And we know people who've been in Sweden for 20 years and they still struggle with the language and they do not have a network, and they would still need the same support. So I think we try to support people for as long as they need, and then you kind of need to take the personal circumstances into account. But at the Welcome House, since it's only existed for 2 years, we will see. That is a permanent program, so everyone who needs their support might enter. And I think as well that people who have been longer in the country are most welcome to gain support.
Gracias, Anita. Bueno, entonces, si quieren, yo quisiera dejar
Thank
algunas
you.
reflexiones y próximos pasos.
I think I'll just share some final thoughts and next steps based on what we heard today, both from Uruguay as well as the URBELAC group, is that we need to address the needs of all vulnerable populations and not focus just on migrant populations. It can be a rather complex task, but it's the best way to go. In terms of the projects in Barranquilla in Sweden, most cities that welcome migrants have this one-stop shop concept in play. I think it's very clear to the folks in Uruguay that this is a good pathway. And again, as we said earlier, the devil is in the details, but you have to start somewhere. Undoubtedly, jobs are a key component in all of this, and making jobs available, especially to those who don't have proper documentation, is absolutely fundamental. These one-stop shop programs that focus on job acquisition need to also focus on both soft and hard skills. I visited Barranquilla and I was able to see at least 10 training programs that they offered in their center. And I think something that was mentioned that is very important and that furthermore is more properly adapted to the reality that people live day to day in Montevideo and in other parts of Europe. I don't think Barranquilla mentioned this, but they did, or he did allude to the value of these migrants from Venezuela. And one of the great achievements of this opportunity center is that it's a wonderful machine to incorporate people that want to donate and help and coordinate. So when you go to the opportunity center, there's a lot of people there working and arriving and interviewing and doing all these things. And this is a key element when we're talking about providing training in a collaborative framework. We didn't talk a great deal about the anti-discriminatory practices issue, but this is something that really permeated the discussions with URBELAC, the colleagues from Chile and Sao Paulo that also participated in this network, but for reasons that I won't go into now, couldn't participate in today's session. But this is a key element of these discussions. I also want to comment that both in Stockholm and Santiago, there are important populations of Haitians, and there are very interesting programs to immediately translate communications. And this allowed the local service providers to garner a much better understanding in a much more expedited way of the situation for the people they were trying to serve. I wanted to also mention the issue of housing, and I think this behooves all of us to have discussions and interaction in this regard. And another question that I have that we didn't really address in depth today due to a lack of time is the types of jobs and types of vocation or work training that is required for these populations. So I'm going to share everybody's contact information so you can reach out to each other amongst yourselves and start these dialogues over time. Well, from our standpoint, we want to express our thanks for all of the presentations. And I think the most important thing is that we all have each other's contact information, emails, so that we start to engage with each other. And by doing things, I think we can learn a great deal more. Part of doing involves taking part in a meeting such as this. And this will allow us to meet our goals for the city's network as well as our own organization's goals. Thank you very much to everyone for your time, for your participation. I want to thank the URBELAC team for always being available to help out. And I want to thank everybody for joining us in this virtual meeting. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Gracias.
Tack så mycket.
Buenas tardes a todos. Buenas tardes.